Are you looking for a way to scale your short-term rental business and buy more properties? Well, co-hosting might be the right fit for you. Welcome to the Cohost Coach podcast with Joe Roney. This episode of the Cohost Coach is brought to you by Savvy STR Agents. If you're looking to buy a short-term rental, then contact the STR Savvy Agent team at savvy.realty.
Welcome to another episode of the Cohost Coach. I am Joe Roney, and I am super excited for you to be here today. And today we're going to talk a little about something a little bit tough that we've all been going through the last couple of months. So this episode will probably air in early November. In late September and October, we had multiple hurricanes that hit the Florida area, North Carolina, South Carolina. We've had tornadoes this year. We've had lots of different natural disasters that happened really in a lot of different communities. So as a co-host, I want to talk about how you handle that and what your responsibilities are, because at the end of the day, you're the property manager for these properties, and you want to make sure that they are safe and they are ready to go in case something like this happens. What do you do with displaced guests and all of the different things? So let's go ahead and get started and talk about first thing. One thing that I've learned is that in my co-host properties, I don't have enough emergency supplies. So one of the things that we are doing after these natural disasters is putting together some additional emergency supply buckets. We have some stuff in the house, but making sure that each house has extra, batteries and flashlights and, a weather radio and, different things. Because if you're losing power for a long period of time, there's some things that you definitely need to have in these properties to make sure if you have a guest there and this happens, that they have something to be able to get through. So good idea to have. It's something that we're going to be adding to all of our properties. We already have a small bucket, but we're definitely going to be increasing that and making sure that we have the right supplies for our guests in case this happens. Now, obviously, in these situations, a lot of times the guest is going to leave, and we had it in multiple houses that we manage. When Helene was coming up through the Gulf Coast, that the guests, even though we were actually about 40 to 50 miles west of where the storm was hitting, there was still some rain. We had some guests that had decided to leave a little early, or guests that decided to delay their trip and come a day late, and that was okay. So we didn't have to worry about the guests weathering the storm because they did leave a day early or stay or come a day late. Now, it's really easy to say, I'm a business owner and I run a business and we are not going to give refunds or, we have a strict cancellation policy. And I am 100% on board with having a strict cancellation policy or whatever cancellation policy you have in your market. But at the same time, as co-hosts, we've got to be a little empathetic, right? I mean, if you have a hurricane bearing down on you and your guest didn't buy trip insurance, and they're not going to be able to go on vacation for a week or a month or whatever it may be, and they're out thousands and thousands of dollars, we have to be a little more empathetic about that and sometimes go above and beyond our regular cancellation policy. We compete with hotels. Hotels are going to cancel, give them a full refund, the whole works. We should be in that same mindset if we are in an evacuation type zone. Now, that doesn't mean every time there's a thunderstorm or snow or whatever it may be that we're canceling and giving a full refund. It's a little different when you have a category 4 or 5 hurricane coming right at you, and it's going to be really close to be a little more lenient on your cancellation policy. So just something to really think about. Yes, we are running a business. We are there to not only make money, but to help our owners make money. But I think our owners that we're co-hosting for would also have the same opinion. We don't want to put a guest in harm's way, and we definitely don't want to just, take someone's money when they're not able to actually come into the area. We're seeing in North Carolina right now where, there's, guests that were booked later this month, and they can't even there's not even roads to get to their house. So, we're definitely going to be, out that money, and the owners are going to be out that money. So this goes back to in the very, very beginning when you're having that conversation with your owner about co-hosting for them on what type of insurance they have. do they have loss of income? And that's something to even talk about with your owner is, during that loss of income, it's going to be loss of income for the owner. It's also going to be loss of income for you. And are you going to get paid out for those bookings that have to get canceled? If they have that loss of income, you could put that into your contract to where you're getting a percentage of that loss of income so you can continue to make money during that time frame. So, if the owner does not have a full short-term rental policy with loss of income, now is the time to have that conversation, right? Because you don't know if this next natural disaster is going to come towards you, and it could be an earthquake or a tornado, whatever it may be. You definitely want to be prepared and have those conversations with your owner so you can set up expectations up front. So, really, really something to think about as you're going into this co-host business. So, obviously some of these natural disasters are things that we can prepare for ahead of time. In a hurricane situation, we know a hurricane is coming, a week ahead of time. We can go down there, have the handyman board up windows, put up, hurricane shutters, take stuff off the main level if you think you're in a flood zone and, get them up to the second level or whatever it may be. That's something that we can prepare for when we have a week's notice. But earlier this year, I actually had a natural disaster with one of my properties I manage, and it was a tornado. And a tornado is not one of those things you can really plan ahead of time for, right? So, this was in Panama City Beach. It was a house that was a couple blocks from the beach, and we had a severe thunderstorm. And that severe thunderstorm sparked a pretty big tornado that went right through the east end of Panama City Beach. And it didn't hit the property that we co-host head on, but it kind of sliced it enough to where we had some damage. So this property, this was on a Tuesday that the tornado came through and hit. And, it blew out some windows, had my handyman go down there right away as soon as the storm was over, and do an assessment of the damage. And we had a couple blown out windows. We had railing that was ripped off of the, third level. We had some additional damages, some roof damage, a few things like that. And this is one of those things that, like I said, it's a tornado. You can't prepare for when a tornado is going to hit, but how do you respond? How do you react? And in this situation, I knew that the owner that I was co-hosting for had responsibilities with his job. So I actually picked up, got in my car the next day, drove the 12 hours down to Panama City Beach, and I knew I had a guest coming in that next weekend. Now, thankfully, we didn't have a guest during the tornado, but we did have a guest coming in about 5 days later, and it was going to be a snowbird. So they were actually going to be in the house for a month. And we didn't want to lose that booking, but at the same time, we needed to make sure the house was ready and safe and it was okay for that guest. So, yes, I could have probably relied on my handyman to take care of some of those items for me, but he lives in that area, so he had some of his own damage to take care of as well. So you can't always just rely on your boots on the ground and and think they're going to be able to handle everything for you. We're seeing this in North Carolina right now where, some of these cleaners and handyman, they haven't even been able to leave their house. They don't have roads to be able to get to where they need to go. So how are they going to go check on your properties for you if they can't even get out of their property? Because typically those people live in that same area that natural disaster is going to be in. So, how mobile are you as a co-host? And this is something that as you get into this business, or if you're already in this business, is something to really think about. So I am fortunate enough that this is my full-time business. I do this for a living, as well as real estate in the Panama City Beach and St. Louis markets. So I have the ability to hop in a car and go where I need to go when I need to be there. So in this house, had the tornado hit, I hopped in my truck, made it down to Panama City Beach, and I spent about 3 days cleaning glass out of the inside of the house from the windows that were blown through. Went through and, make sure we cleaned all the linen. So if any glass, were to get in there, we wanted to change all the sheets, get all fresh linens everywhere just in case. Because, it was funny. We had a window blowout in one room at the back of the house, and there was debris all the way down the hallway into the other bedroom on the bed. Because in a tornado situation, that is going all the way through. So, that it's like a wind tunnel in there. So we didn't have to just take care of the one window or the one bedroom that had the window blown out. That put debris throughout the house. So we had to do a full clean out of it. My cleaning team did come down and help. And then in the backyard, we had glass all over the backyard. And there's really no easy way to get glass out of a backyard in the yard unless you just get on your hands and knees and pick it up. So, we had, my cleaning team and I were out there picking up glass off the ground. We got the windows boarded up, put the hurricane shutters on basically to make sure until we could get the windows replaced. Went and bought some new railing and got some parts to be able to get that railing up. And before that guest checked in 5 days later, we had the house ready to go. Yes, there was a window that that was boarded up. We couldn't get that window replaced in time. But other than that, the guest didn't know any difference. The house was in full, ready to go condition. They had a month-long stay, had a fantastic stay, and left us a 5-star review. So, if I wasn't able to be mobile and get down there in that timely manner, there's a chance that guest would have canceled, or I would have had to cancel that guest because we weren't able to do it. Now, this was an easy situation because I only had one house. But if I had 2, 3, 4 houses that I'm managing and they all got hit, which is what's happening, in these hurricanes that have happened recently, that's a little bit different situation. You're not going to be able to go and do cleanup at every single house. That being said, you probably, as a co-host or a property manager, should be in that area doing everything you can to help. Obviously, if there's major damage and it's not something that you can, get back in line, you're not going to be in there rebuilding anything. I'm not saying go out there and rebuild a house, but, if it was, some minor flooding or some minor damages that you can go down and help take care of and help assess the damage, it's something that you definitely should consider doing as a co-host. That being said, it's also what type of relationship you have with your owners. I have some owners that are extremely hands-on, and in a situation like this, they would drop what they were doing to take care of their own house and be there. And that's great, but not every owner can do that, depending on what their job is and what their responsibilities are. So, so as you're going through this process and thinking about what would happen to me and my business and for my owners in a natural disaster, it's a good time now after we've gone through a couple big ones to really start planning for that. So, the other thing I want to talk about with going through a natural disaster, we talked about planning ahead of time, going through and cleaning up, our cancellation policies with our guests. Those are obviously some really important things that we need to talk about, but another thing that we want to talk about is, and we talked about co-hosting and what market you want to co-host in a couple of podcasts ago, but this is where if your entire business is in one market and that market goes 3 months or 6 months during a rebuild process, where is your income coming in? If your primary income is co-hosting, which that's one of mine, it's not my only income. So, if we were to have a natural disaster, I'm not going to be completely broke, by losing my co-hosting business for a couple of months. But at the same time, if you're working to get your co-hosting business up and running and you want to be able to leave that W-2 and you are only in one market, it's something to think about. Talk to your insurance company about loss of income for you. That way you can get by and weather the storm, as far as that's concerned. But another thing to really consider is making sure that you're in 2 markets. Obviously, as you're getting started in this business, one market is your niche and you're going to have to be in that one market to get going, and we're in Panama City Beach, but we're also in Branson, so we do have 2 markets that we are currently co-hosting in, and we're looking to add a 3rd market in our business, potential winter ski type market, that we're looking to possibly invest for ourselves in, as well as co-host in, because then we have, not only do we have multiple markets that we're co-hosting in, we have different seasons that we're making the majority of our income in. And if there is a natural disaster, we're not sitting around with no business, right? So, if you put all your eggs in one basket and that basket explodes because a hurricane hit it, you're going to be left without any income. And, so as you're getting into this business, before you take that leap to say, okay, I'm ready to, drop my W-2, or I'm ready to, just do this full time, whatever it may be, think about the what ifs, right? What's going to happen in 6 months from now or a year from now if something like this were to happen to you? Because no one ever thought North Carolina would be out of business because of a hurricane. We're talking 500, 800 miles inland is an area that is completely wiped out and not going to have short-term rentals in some areas for 6 months, maybe. I mean, yes, a lot of them actually were, not damaged, and they're going to be up and running within 30 days, which is phenomenal. And and to only have to take 30 days away is great. But it's also peak season in that market. October in the Smokies and the North Carolina area with the fall colors, and I mean it's a peak time of year. So, that's a lot of it's a significant amount of revenue lost, even being down a month. And if you're the co-host in those areas and you're not going to have any revenue for one of your peak months, that could really affect your year. So think about that as you're going into a co-hosting business on, where you're wanting to grow your business, but also making sure that you have a plan A and a plan B, and having at least two markets. Now, I'm not saying go out there and be in 12 different markets and have 12 different houses. There are co-hosts that do that. There are some property managers out there that do this, and there's nothing wrong with it. It definitely spreads yourself pretty thin. So if you do have to be at a certain property, or if you're doing quarterly walkthroughs on your properties, it's going to be a little bit tough to be able to manage all of that. So, I personally recommend, 2 to 3 markets at a max. Doesn't mean you have to stop there, but that's what's best for me and my business is the way that I want to approach it. And it's what I talk to other people in my co-hosting coaching and mastermind program about is, obviously you want to start in that one market and then grow, but not get spread out too thin. So, like I said, these are some, little things that we want to talk about, and make sure that as you're planning and getting into your co-hosting business, you're managing for other people, that, you have these plans ahead of time and you have the what ifs down the road. All right. So quick little recap on today's show. Obviously, these natural disasters have hit, and it's hit hard, and our prayers are with every single one of these, residents, owners, handymen, cleaners, all of these different, people's lives have been affected for the rest of their life. So definitely want to keep thinking about them. And they are definitely in our prayers, so we can get all of these areas recovered, and, ready, so they can move on. We talked about obviously being prepared for a natural disaster, having some emergency supplies at every one of your houses, thinking about your cancellation policy, possibly relaxing it. Yes, it's a business, but we also are human beings, and we want to care for each other and make sure that we're a little more empathetic about a disaster like that's happening. You know, what kind of responsibilities are you going to take as a co-host on what you are going to be able to do to help your owners out in these properties to either prepare ahead of time or come in after the fact? And then, finally, what you can do to not only help the owners in a situation like this, making sure that they have the proper insurance coverage for something like this, but also making sure that you have some sort of backup plan on where your income is going to come from if your area is hit by a natural disaster. So that's it for this week's episode of the Co-Host Coach. I really appreciate you guys coming and listening in, and I'll see you next week.